in a four This is the first in a four-part training series about DE&I for the recycling and solid waste industries. We are delighted that you have chosen to join us for the training. We believe that by understanding and developing our awareness of DE&I, it increases our understanding of people at work and in our personal lives. It enables us to look past our own boundaries and be more accepting of others, and has the potential to open the door to new opportunities. Before we begin, I'd like to thank ISRI for sponsoring the trainings, and thank NWRA and Revolution for sponsoring NERC's work on DE&I. I'd also like to thank the West Michigan Sustainable Business Forum for hosting today's training and for providing our technical support. I would also like to thank the Training Planning Committee members who have partnered with us to develop the training series. Our presenters today include three accomplished women who are well known for their work in DE&I and recycling. Tamara Lundgren is the Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer of Schnitzer Steel Industries, Inc. Prior to joining Schnitzer, Tamara was an investment banker and lawyer with 25 years of experience in the U.S. and Europe. She is a member of the Board of Directors of Ryder System, Inc., the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Tamara earned a BA degree from Wellesley College and a JD degree from Northwestern University School of Law. Cheryl Murray is the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer and Vice President of Human Resources at Schnitzer Steel Industries. Steph joined Schnitzer in 2012. She serves on the Board of Directors for the American Red Cross and co-leads their Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Steph has an electrical engineering degree from Northwestern University. Cheryl Coleman is the Vice President of Sustainability for the Institute of Scrap Recycling Industries. Previous to joining ISRI in 2020, Cheryl served as the Director for the Resource Conservation and Sustainability Division at US EPA. Cheryl has over 30 years of experience with materials and waste management. I would like to invite Tamara and Steph to begin their presentation.
Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you, Marianne, and thank you everyone for joining us today. As Marianne said, I'm Steph Murray, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer and Vice President of Human Resources, and I'm here with our Chairman, President, and CEO, Tamara Lundgren. So we're going to spend a few minutes sharing our diversity, equity, and inclusion journey with you. So, Tamara, the first question I have for you is, how has the call for corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives shaped executive strategies?
Well, thank you, Steph, for organizing this. Thank you, Marianne. I'm delighted to be here with you and with both of you and Cheryl. It's very nice to meet you. You and I haven't met before. So welcome everyone. So, Steph, I would probably rephrase that question a little bit, because I think that the corporate DE&I initiatives really stand on the shoulders of companies who were forward thinking about diversity and inclusion, and stand on the shoulders of those companies who naturally were diverse. And I look at our company, for example, which is 116 years old, which was founded by an immigrant, Sam Schnitzer. Our workforce has always been broad-based as a result, and yet there's plenty for us to do to enhance it, improve it, expand it, and formalize it. But our company actually started out as a diverse company based on how it was founded. So I think the question really is what happens when something like diversity, inclusion becomes enough part of our culture that it is taken up by by companies as mainstream. And I think that when an idea or an initiative transforms from something that might be special to some companies, maybe part of their century-old culture, but when it becomes mainstream in business, that's when functions are formalized. That's when goals are set. That's when progress is measured. And that's when you can actually see it being taken to the next level and beyond. So I'd kind of switch it and say, you know what, we all stand on the shoulders of those companies that started early. And now we have a way to help all of us progress and all of us enhance and strengthen it and make it part of all of our DNA, have DE&I become part of our DNA.
Great, thank you, Tamara. My next question for you is, how does diversity, equity, and inclusion benefit the employer?
Well, in my view, in countless ways. And I'll start with saying innovation and growth. I just don't think that you can innovate and you can grow if you have the same minds, the same people, the same backgrounds, the same experiences around you. It's difficult to develop new ideas, break through barriers, implement change management if you are working off of one set of guidelines or one set of experiences. So I think that you need different perspectives if you're going to innovate and grow. And I don't think that there's an industry out there that can do without innovation and growth. And certainly our industry is right on the precipice of a huge growth spurt and a requirement for big innovation. So I think that's number one. I think the second thing that I would say is about risk management. I actually don't think that you can effectively manage risk if you don't have diversity on your teams. And again, that's diversity of thought, of training, of backgrounds, of perspectives. Because if everybody is the same and everybody has been trained to think the same and evaluate issues in the same way, then everyone's going to be looking around the corner of that same wall, and they're going to miss the bus coming from behind them or from the side or from somewhere else. So I just don't think that you can effectively manage risk without diversity. And then I'll move to inclusion. And I'll say that if you do not create a workplace that is welcoming, that people are excited to be part of, whether that's remotely or whether that's in person, but where they feel needed, where they want to participate, where they care about the people around them and the communities in which they work. If you don't have a workforce that feels that way, you're not going to be able to bring out the best in them. And if you can't bring out the best in your workforce, then it's very difficult for your company to reach its potential. So I'd summarize it really in those ways: innovation and growth, risk management, and bringing the best out of people.
Excellent, thank you, Tamara. This next question has been challenging and can be challenging, and so it's around how do you approach initiatives and ideas that are more challenging to measure, like behavior change, employee awareness, and organizational engagement with respect to diversity, equity, inclusion?
Well, I think you're hitting on a really good topic, because we can all commit to a diversity initiative, but how do you really translate that into change and into your culture, and how do you really see the benefits of it? And that's hard. And I'm going to switch tables with you in a moment and ask you questions in terms of how you've done it, how you've gotten it to the point where it is at our company. We're not done. It's a journey, and it's a journey that we want to be a continuing journey. But I think the first thing that you have to do is, or at least the first thing that I did and we did at our company, is number one, you have to communicate, and you have to communicate at all levels, and you have to have influencers at all levels. It's not enough for just the CEO to announce, this is what we want to focus on. We want to make sure that we've got a diverse and inclusive workplace, and just sound like corporate speak. That's not going to change anybody's hearts and minds. It's not going to really be enough for people to grow and develop and understand. So you really have to be communicating at all levels of the organization. I think you need to make sure that you have influencers who are aligned with this thinking and are excited about it and want to help make the change and drive the impact. I think once you assess that there's been enough communication around it, and maybe communication where people are raising their eyes and saying, well, what is this about? Does this really affect me? What does it, why do I need to do it? Those questions and that skepticism, I think, is healthy. And that's when you train. And that's when you have to teach people, what does unconscious bias mean? And what does inclusiveness mean? And what does speaking, creating environments where you can speak up and express different views and feel okay about that, feel safe in doing that, not feel that you're going to be canceled or shunned. And so I think that training is really important. And then I think you have to give it time. You have to look for evidence that some of that change has taken hold. So what are the things that you look at in doing that? You look at things like hiring. Have there been any changes in hiring? And I know at our company that I saw that without this was before we put the Rooney Rule in place, before we did formal leadership training across the board. But I would see we would be recruiting for a position, and I'd see, oh, we hired a woman in that position, or we hired an ethnic minority in that position, or we hired an African American in that position, and that was without a formalization. It just was, that was the best candidate, and that's who happened to show up in the slate of candidates that we saw for that position. So you start looking for evidence of change. Look at, as I said, look at who is hiring. Look at things like maybe development of employee resource groups. Are those developing so that people are within the company are learning about different groups and different people. You look at promotions. You may even look at leadership positions, which are not necessarily promotions, but who's taking on what I would call an extracurricular leadership position. Are those people diverse? And that's when you start to see evidence of change. And then I think you survey. You do employment engagement surveys, and you ask questions about people's comfort level and their feeling of inclusiveness and their feeling of bias and the like. And then you get that feedback and you start all over again. You communicate the feedback from those surveys. You train again, maybe in different aspects or at different levels. You look for evidence, and it's kind of rinse and repeat. And so that's the only way I think that you can measure culture change in any large organization.
Great, thank you, Tamara. So it's time for us to switch seats. So now
okay.
I get to answer your questions.
All right, so I'm gonna dial back to the question that you were asking me, which is how can you tell whether you're being successful? And actually, I'm gonna be a little bit more pointed and say, what do you do when that skepticism that I was referring to, where people say, this doesn't have anything to do with me, or this is for another group, and just really aren't interested in engaging? How do you deal with that? Or how do you deal with managers who say, look, it's more important for my people to be focused on this, and I don't want them spending time training on unconscious bias, for example?
Great question, Tamara. Thank you for that. So a real important part of any journey, especially when you're trying to change culture, is to meet the culture where it is. So the first thing I'd recommend is that really understand the culture, do an assessment, have employee focus groups, and really understand and gauge the situation as opposed to how receptive are people to any type of diversity, equity, and inclusion program, and what type of resistance might we get. And so once the data is together, the next thing that we did was, try to find a common ground, because there's so much data out there about the benefits of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and everybody wants to win. We all want to win. We all want to be successful. We all want to do well. And so really help everybody understand, hey, we are doing this. Yes, we're doing this because it's the right thing to do, but we're also doing this, and Tamara, just like you said earlier, because it helps with innovation, productivity, sales. Companies with more diverse employees and diverse leaders are more effective and more profitable and make more money, and they have better cultures, employees are engaged, higher retention. So there's so many benefits beyond diversity, equity, inclusion being the right thing to do. And that helps the leaders understand what I call the WIFM, what's in it for them. So here's what's in it for them. And then draw those connections. And over time, as the program builds momentum, because ours is still building, over time, I've seen the naysayers end up being advocates and allies, which has been a wonderful thing to see in our own journey here within Schnitzer Steel.
So what kind of resources have you found to be most powerful in making this happen? What kind of training, what kind of, what are specific tools that you've used that have really made a difference?
Another great question. So it's a misconception that you need a lot of resources to start a diversity, equity, and inclusion program. So what I found is the best resource are the people within the organization. That was the best resource for us to really get this going. Finding the advocates, finding the ambassadors. It's very important to have executive sponsorship. So for us, Tamara, because it was you came to me and said, hey, let's do this. So for us, executive sponsorship was pretty easy. But trying to get the support from all levels, that was the part that was more of a challenge. So we started off with sponsorship, and then we, with the ambassadors that we had in the business through our focus groups, we formed a cross-functional steering committee. And that committee became the working committee to help decide what are we going to do next? When do we launch employee resource groups? What type of training do we think we should start with? That group was the governing body and brain trust that helped us guide and steer the program to make sure that we were staying true to our vision. It's also important to have a vision, staying true to our vision and our goals, and also embedding it in the fabric of what the company was trying to accomplish. And also, I would say high potential employees are a great resource as well, because they're seeking development and growth. And you can get a lot of development and growth through DE&I programs. There's also plenty of resources on LinkedIn, other DE&I professionals. So I reached out to people at other companies that I used to work for, and I knew that they had someone doing diversity, equity, and inclusion. LinkedIn's a great resource. Lots of tools there. Webinars. There's so many free webinars that offer a lot of information and some very interesting diversity, equity, and inclusion materials. There's podcasts, TED Talks that have great DE&I content. And just recently, there's a really good certification course out of Cornell. And we actually had our diversity, equity, and inclusion program manager that everyone will meet very soon, Whitney. She just completed her certification. So there's access, formal education and certifications as well. So there's so many resources and a lot that people can use to get started without having a huge budget, et cetera, to get started.
So talk a little bit about training, and whether do you use the same type of training tools and cadence, whether you're training people in the field versus salespeople versus functional people who are in functional areas. Talk a little bit about the specifics of training and the things that you found to be most effective.
Right. For training, what's more important, the most important thing in terms of training is to make sure that it is helping to accomplish the goal. So the advice I would have is make sure there's a vision, a strategy, a goal, and targets, and putting together a roadmap. So when you're training, there's so many facets of diversity, equity, and inclusion. People can get lost in the shuffle. So we don't want to pull every diversity, equity, inclusion training program out and just start
Right.
training people. It's really important to piece it out and decide where the focus areas are. So for us, it was important to have a common language. So we decided to start with what is diversity, equity, and inclusion, number one. And number two, we really tackled the topic of unconscious bias. What is it? How to recognize it? And then we use several different modalities. Online, because our workforce is very dispersed. So I know we have people on the call that have dispersed workforce. So online is a great tool to get baseline training out to the entire workforce. You can track it, you can measure it, you can manage it. We also provided our managers with toolkits to further the conversations within their teams. And we coined the phrase getting comfortable with uncomfortable conversations. And so we gave them those tools as well. We also, in startup meetings for our line supervisors, gave them small kind of on-demand training that's 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes in length. There's icebreakers that we provided and other tools for leaders to use with their staffs as well. Obviously, the most effective way to train is in person, but with the pandemic, we found other creative ways via Zoom calls. Our employee resource groups do lots of training as well. So we tackled it from several different angles because there's no one size fits all approach. And so far it's been working. Again, our plan as we're able to be in person more is to do more in-person training and more hands-on training at the frontline level.
So I watched you develop this program, and I've seen how impactful that it's been. And I think that there were two things from my perspective that were really impactful. One was how you started with small conversations, having uncomfortable conversations, making them comfortable to have. And I know how that drew people together, and it drew people together while you were even rolling. I mean, you began it a couple of years before the pandemic, but you were continuing it during the pandemic. And I think the groundwork that you laid pre-pandemic, when we were really starting the program, really showed its strength during the pandemic, when there were so many issues that people were facing and so much polarization. So I think the commitment and the time that it took to roll out across our company small conversations definitely was worth it. And as you say, it didn't take external resources, but it took commitment from not just the human resources staff, but all levels of leadership. I think the other thing that I thought was really impactful that you did, Steph, was the unconscious bias training. And there, we have not just a diverse workforce of people from North America, we've got an international workforce. And I can't tell you how many people came to me after going through the unconscious bias seminars that you did and training, and we're just completely unaware. And I know Yale has did a great piece on 60 Minutes years ago that I've spoken to you about, where they can prove unconscious bias in nonverbal infants. That if you're a nonverbal infant, you tend to crawl toward the infant who likes the same type of cereal that you're eating. And that self-awareness that your programs really developed in people, I also think took our program forward much more quickly and much more impactfully, because it just improved self-awareness. So I think those two things were really, really good. But give us an example of how you've called out unconscious bias in the workforce.
Okay, and thank you, Tamara, for the question. And many ways, the easiest way is when you see it, pull the person aside and have a conversation about it, and make sure it's a safe space. Definitely don't do it publicly. So pull the person aside, kind of have a conversation. If in meetings with a group of people that you work with very closely and you trust, and it's a safe space for open conversations, it's also a good teaching moment for other people in the meeting, hey, when you made that statement, I heard this person make a comment and then that comment wasn't acknowledged. And someone else made the same comment and the comment was acknowledged. And so because we've done that so often, it's becoming part of our culture and part of our fabric at Schnitzer Steel, almost to a point where people will kind of look at me when they hear something that they don't think is quite right. And it's like, hey, I want us to do the right thing, whether I'm there or not. So if you hear that, call it out, have the safe space. And to your point, Tamara, the groundwork that we've laid has really helped the culture be open and our employees be open to those types of conversations. That's great.
So I'm
And,
getting pinged that
yeah.
we're up on time. So I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tamara. So for everyone on the call, we actually have a video that we'd like to share highlighting our employee resource groups, and then we'll come back with some takeaways.
Schnitzer's employee resource groups, ERGs, are voluntary, employee-led groups that promote a diverse and inclusive workplace that aligns with our company mission, values, goals, and business practices. ERGs are open to all employees and aim to build a sense of belonging and deepen the understanding of our shared purpose. Schnitzer's ERGs include Pride, Black Employee Network, Women at Shin, Veterans Employee Resource Group, Hispanic Employee Resource Group, and Build, Building Up Individuals' Lives Daily Employee Resource Group. We asked several ERG leaders to comment on 3 key questions about their ERG journeys.
I had really been hoping for a women's group to help establish a sense of community and ensure equity for women in our company since I had joined Schnitzer in 2017. So when I was given the opportunity to help co-found and co-lead Women at Shin, I jumped at that opportunity. I was very excited to help establish this group for the company.
Schnitzer has a very robust Hispanic community within the company. We felt that creating an Hispanic employee resource group would allow our Spanish-speaking employees to interact with each other, to share their experiences, and particularly to grow professionally within the company.
The reason I started this ERG is because I wanted the opportunity to be able to help change lives and inspire people. And some of the best ways to go about helping yourself is by putting aside those issues, those fears, and focusing on others. And you'd be amazed by going out and helping others that are less fortunate, others that might need that just little extra mentorship, and just giving that extra time and what it does for you when you go back to taking care of your own personal problems. And being able to inspire others to be able to step forward and make changes in their life is just an amazing feeling.
So it was actually Schnitzer as a company who wanted to start the Pride ERG. I believe it was the second or third ERG group that they put together. The work was really fulfilling, and it was really, really cool to be a part of that. And I've seen how difficult work environments can be for those who are actually part of the LGBT community when there's not inclusion and diversity initiatives. And so helping push that forward and help grow that is really important to me.
With many veterans and families of service members at Schnitzer already sharing stories and friendship, formalizing a veterans group that promotes our culture was the logical next step towards employee development, attracting new talent, and community outreach.
I decided to join the Black Employee Network Employee Resource Group because coming into such a large company, it gave me a starting point to really engage with my colleagues and peers who we automatically align just because we're African American. And then it just gave me an opportunity to really segue and connect with other members of our employee group, and it has been truly, truly awesome to be a part of this group. The benefits, I believe, of any employee resource group is it gives you an opportunity for the company to really engage and understand what others go through. It's really important that we create these safe spaces to have these open and honest conversations by engaging with each other.
The Build ERG, building up individuals' lives daily, brings a lot of benefits to everybody. I think one of the most important benefits for our employees is that it gives us an opportunity to serve others. As a company, it's going to benefit us because it gives us a chance to not only operate in a great community and hire those folks that live within our community, but a chance to step in that community and help those others reach their potential and grow as well. And for the community, they get to see a company that is, takes it a little bit more serious than just operating a business and making money, but a company that truly does care about the community they operate in by helping others be able to reach their potential.
This employee resource group focuses on closing gaps that organizations may have, particularly with the Spanish-speaking employees in our case. And I think in exchange, the company benefits from having a diverse workforce, which contributes to the long-term sustainability program of our company.
The steel industry is not well known for being a diverse or inclusive environment, and so changing that culture from a ground level with the engagement and involvement of the employees, allies, and community members alike is really the best approach, in my opinion, to make that change and to help the other employees see that community for what it really is.
Veterans understand dynamics of leadership under stress. We understand the rigors of tight schedules and limited resources. Thanks to extensive training, veterans are aware of health and safety protocols, both for themselves and the welfare of others. The VERG is a bridge within our company to advance a supportive, positive environment where employees can feel valued, included, and empowered.
We just recently finished our winter drive where we got to harvest basically some donations and socks, gloves, hats, coats, and just different donations from our employees. And we're very excited going into our next quarter because we're going to get to focus on something that's really just kind of been rising to the top of things lately, and that is addictions. And not only do we have a community of people that are suffering through addictions, but there might even be just a few employees that either have had to suffer through it firsthand or maybe have loved ones. And so it's just a great opportunity for us to get more knowledge and education around addictions. And of course, another opportunity for us to be able to reach out and help someone.
On the Hispanic Employee Resource Group journey, I think it includes reaching out to a larger quantity of Spanish-speaking employees, and also more importantly is to establish several nationwide initiatives that we're currently already rolling out. For example, creating a translation service that many of the company departments can benefit from, and more importantly, our Spanish-speaking employees can also benefit from having communications translated directly to them into Spanish.
So I think our next step is to, we'd love to grow our membership. So we have some decent involvement from the salaried employees, but getting the hourly and union employees engaged is really our next focus point. So that's really where we see some of our challenges, but that's where we're wanting to drive the next steps.
The next steps for Women at Shin are to continue to build our network and establish connections with our members and allies. We're also working on a strategy to integrate more into the business where we can add value and to attract the best talent for Schnitzer.
I think the next steps for our BEN Employee Resource Group is just to really create more opportunities for Schnitzer employees to connect, Schnitzer employees to engage, and really Schnitzer employees to really understand how we all can be allies to each other, because we all have issues that we think are important and that we all should engage with at some point in time.
At Schnitzer, we believe employee engagement initiatives focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, volunteerism, and employee health and wellness contribute to our operational excellence, the achievement of strategic goals, and the growth and development of our workforce. In 2021, our company joined a distinguished group of organizations that value employee trust, respect, pride, and camaraderie when we achieve certification as a great place to work.
Oops, have to unmute. Okay, thank you so much. And now we have some takeaway slides that we'd like to share with the group. Okay, so as we spoke about, our diversity, equity, and inclusion program is really embedded into the fabric of the organization. So we want to talk about a few things that we're focused on. And so our strategy is really very simple with how we're approaching it at Stitzer. And we talked about this in the earlier comments, is to engage our employees every day. And we call it our E3 strategy. The other piece that we spoke to was we really want to inspire collaboration. That's a very critical part of what we're doing in the company. Cultural awareness is really the foundation of our program. And we want to make sure we have safe conversations. So having a safe space for those conversations. We also call it getting comfortable with uncomfortable conversations. We have multiple feedback channels from our employees, which helps serve as a gauge to let us know our progress. And we also benchmark our progress. And our programs, again, that really help us with our diversity, equity, and inclusion program. The fuel of our program, and you just saw it in the videotape, is really our employee resource groups. And we have 6 that the video spoke to. And those groups have really helped us shape our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy and propel the progress that we've made. Employee recognition is very important. And we have a program, a recognition program that we call STAR, and the acronym is Safety, Teamwork, Attitude, and Resourcefulness. And that's a peer recognition program that's had a lot of traction within our company. We also have business learning and awareness programs, which serves as a way for employees to understand the great career development opportunities here in the company. And also it's great training to help employees learn more about what's happening in other parts of the business. And as we spoke to, we're very engaged in training of our leaders. So we have a pretty robust frontline leader development initiative that's underway that we launched last year. And every quarter, Tamara and myself have employee town halls that are very well attended and lots of positive feedback. And that's a way for us to stay very engaged, even though we can't be in person as often as we'd like to be. So thank you so much for hearing about our journey. And so now we're going to hand the program back over to Marianne.
Thank you, Steph and Tamara, for sharing your story with us. It was so interesting. And I have lots of questions. We are taking questions in the chat or the Q&A box, but we'll be holding them until after Cheryl speaks, okay? So now I'd like to ask Cheryl to start her presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much, Tamara and Steph, for what you shared. You've really covered a lot of what I was going to cover, so that's going to leave us more time for questions. But I want to thank you because what you shared in the time that we've been together really will emphasize some of the points that I want to encourage our listeners here to really think about as they go back to their respective organizations and really start to think through how they want to address ensuring that they have a diverse and equitable and an inclusive culture within their business. I also want to say a special thank you to Marianne and Dan and to NERC for allowing me to be a part of this important conversation today. I always like to start out with definitions so that we're all on the same page about what we're talking about and understand the terms that are being used. And you heard these terms in the presentation by Tamara and Steph. When we have policies and practices that create inclusion and make all our employees feel welcome, valued, and respected, then we are really demonstrating that we're willing to provide an equitable and fair access to progression opportunities. To achieve a diversity, equity, and inclusion, we really need to move beyond thinking about just diversity, as you heard, and just looking at diversity, but really focus on providing a safe, open, and inclusive work environment that's built on a foundation where all employees feel a sense of belonging. The benefits of this is that you really have a well-managed and diverse and inclusive team that has a broader range of knowledge and skills. They're also better at identifying and solving problems that others may overlook, and that ultimately gives that company a competitive edge in accessing new markets and a higher market share. I'm a huge fan of sustainability. And for a long time, sustainability was synonymous with the word environment, but it's evolved to encompass so much more. There still remains a large emphasis on preserving natural resources and maintaining environmental compliance and safety. But sustainability today is also about having a business culture that ensures that you have a diverse staff and that staff receives wages that allows them to thrive. And it operates with governing principles that start at the CEO level that include business ethics, cybersecurity, and the health and safety of employees and the surrounding community. And we often see them characterized or summed up in the acronym ESG, which stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance. The workplace culture is changing. We are living through a time like no other in modern history. Over the last year, people around the world have simultaneously faced a global pandemic that's been responsible for more than 2.6 million deaths, participated in the world's largest work from home experiment, and witnessed a global movement to end policies and practices that have historically impacted underserved communities, including people of color, women, and people with disabilities. Every single person on this earth has been impacted by the pandemic. The physical and mental and emotional impact of all of these events have motivated company leaders as well as us as individuals to really look more closely at the toll they have taken on our lives, and in many instances to make many changes, major changes. Visibility around the disparate impact on certain segments of the workforce has motivated leaders to commit to diversity, equity, and inclusion more intentionally and become more transparent about their company's DEI-related progress. Granted, often this commitment and transparency has been stimulated in response to public demand for transparent data, including investors. But the trade-off on that and the benefit is that we're finding, and everyone is finding, that the greater the diversity in the workplace and the boardroom has a strong potential to drive long-term sustainable firm financial performance. Studies by the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School have shown that more than 70% of job seekers are looking to work for a company with a dedicated commitment to DEI. And as you see on this slide, a large majority are really looking at companies that have a strong green footprint, as well as a commitment to social responsibility. So I like to talk about this from the standpoint of the business case. The Great Resignation is real, and it can be seen across virtually all industries. It's common to see a surge in quitting when the job market is tight and there's a plethora of open positions. But what's happening right now is unlike anything we've ever seen before. According to the latest job openings and labor turnover survey, a record number of 4.4 million Americans left their jobs in September alone, accelerating a trend that has become known as the Great Resignation. The number of Americans quitting their jobs has now exceeded pre-pandemic highs for 6 straight months. And employers, especially in low-wage sectors, are struggling to fill open positions. Let's take a look at why this may be happening. There are family pressures that have been imposed by school closures, hybrid learning models, quarantines after exposure. There's limited childcare, the closing and reopening of businesses, the reshuffling of the population to different populations and different areas and industries, and the fear of the virus in face-to-face settings. And all of these have most certainly played a role. But the historic rise in quitting also seems to be about more than all of this. There are those who believe that generous government benefits encouraging people to quit are responsible. But a Wall Street Journal analysis and some research indicates that those states that ended enhanced federal unemployment benefits early have so far seen about the same job growth rates as states that continued offering pandemic-related extra aids. Certainly, the reasons for these trends vary, but one major driver appears to be that during this time, many of us have reevaluated our lives and our priorities are changing to be more mental health and family focused. The pandemic and the rise of remote work have changed the way we view our lives and the world. A more diverse, equitable, and inclusive work environment can positively influence attraction and retention of good employees. So let's think about some of the things that Tamara and Stephanie shared earlier. They started out by talking about the culture, not the business culture, but the culture that exists and it has existed in Schnitzer since its start. You heard many examples of how Schnitzer is walking the talk, but I want to give you another one. When I first joined ISRI in 2020, I came into a newly created position. Robin Weiner, our president, asked me what I thought ISRI should be doing that we weren't doing. And I took that opportunity to share with her a passion that I've had for some time. And that is really to start exposing students who may not be aware of the opportunities that exist in the recycling industry to careers that they might want to consider as they prepare to face this world from a business perspective. And so with ISRI's permission and the backing of our president as well as our board, we have begun to develop a program where we will be focusing on HBCUs, or historically Black colleges and universities, and tribal colleges and universities, as well as trade schools, to expose them to career opportunities in the recycling industry. When I had the opportunity to present this to our members, Schnitzer was the first member organization to stand up and say, we're in. They have dedicated a team member who is working with us to help develop the program. This is a demonstration that this is a part of their culture. It's who they are. It's not what they do. It is who they are. And when we make diversity, equity, and inclusion a part of who we are, then we create that aura that attracts employees, it attracts qualified employees, but it also attracts qualified employees who come to stay. They come to stay for the long haul because they invest themselves in the company, and they want to see the company thrive because they know that the company wants them to thrive. So for those of you who are thinking about this more, let me give you another example. Now, some of you may have heard about this, heard me use this before. 25 years ago, if you went into a diner, you did not see avocado toast on the menu. But almost every restaurant you go in today, you see avocado toast on the menu. Why? Because someone cast a wider net, allowed themselves to step outside that box and make an offering to people of something that they may have never been exposed to before. That is one of the greatest benefits of DEI. It allows us to broaden our personal and our professional circle, and we become so much better and so much bigger, and we are able to benefit not only ourselves, but the company we work for, our customers, and ultimately the world. So I encourage all of you to really think about how you can incorporate these practices and these principles in your everyday culture. And I promise you, you will see the benefits that will go beyond your smallest and your greatest imagination. And with that, I'll stop now and turn it back over to Dan and Marianne.
Cheryl, thank you so much. We appreciate those insightful words. And that concludes our presentations for this training. The rest of the time will be dedicated to answering your questions. And today we have Whitney Cox, who is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program Manager at Schnitzer Steel. And Whitney will facilitate the Q&A period.
Thank you, Marianne, and thank you everyone for speaking. We have quite a few questions that have lined up here, so I will go ahead and jump right in to make sure we have time to answer as many as possible. The first question we actually have, Steph, is for you. One of the people listening in asked, where should I start when implementing a D&I program? Well, what are the first steps, and how do you measure success?
Okay, great. And so a place to start is to start finding ambassadors within the organization and form a small group and have that group help put together what the plan may or may not be for DE&I. Because the best resource, like I said earlier, are the people within the organization. Also do some research. There's lots and lots of information about DE&I that's available. Google is a great resource. One of the companies I like that has some really good collateral on DE&I and it's free is McKinsey. So I look at some stuff that McKinsey did. They have great research on DE&I. There's also a company called Catalyst that has good information in terms of DE&I. Okay, and there was a second part, Whitney. I'm sorry if I forgot what it was.
No, you're fine. How do you measure success or progress? Showing that this is something that the company should stick with.
Okay, there's many ways to measure success. Tamara spoke to that. Like the culture change will be evident if you look at who are you hiring, who's leaving the organization, the general pulse of the organization. Surveying is a great tool. We use Great Place to Work, which you saw that we're Great Place to Work certified. So there's many survey tools out there that can also help you. You can do pulse surveys, employee surveys, focus groups is a great way to get feedback and things like that.
Perfect, thank you. Tamara, the second question is for you and it's more forward looking. So looking into the future, how long do you think it'll take for the corporate culture to rebuild and for the new DE&I topics and the new DE&I trainings to become normalized?
Oh, I wish I wish I had a forward, a crystal ball that could give me guidance on a lot. I'll view the hard part of the journey to be over when we're not holding seminars or webinars where we're still looking to make transformational impacts. If you think about safety culture at all our organizations, at this point, I would think that all of our organizations have safety embedded as part of our culture and part of our regulatory scheme. Whether you want to do it or not, OSHA requires you to do it. It is part of how you, what processes and procedures you put in place, what policies you put in place, how you measure it, how you report it. It's part of any operating company's DNA. But it didn't used to be. If you look back, at the beginnings of the steel industry, 100+ years ago, it wasn't like that. So I think that I don't know how long that will take. I think that it will be accelerating though, because I think each generation that is coming up through the ranks is requiring this as table stakes, if you will, as entry. They won't even look at a company if you don't have, if you don't represent certain principles and ideals. So I actually think it will be accelerating, but I can't possibly give you what that time period will be. But I will tell you when I know it will be successful is when we'll look back and say, oh, do you remember when we used to do those webinars? And that's when we'll know that we're now, it's embedded. And now we're clearly going to continue to measure progress and set goals. But I think they will be more incremental than transformational at that point.
Great, thank you. And that answered two questions in one, so that was perfect. Cheryl, I have a question for you. How do you recommend that people look at their current and future policies and try to make them more inclusive and equitable?
Oh, that's a great question. I really think that, as Steph said, really talking to people in your organization and bringing everybody to the table. I'm a strong proponent of collaboration. The more you have people at the table who think differently than you, then the more complete picture you get of what's really going on. So I think bringing a representative group of your organization to the table and really sitting down with them and talking through and not being afraid to talk about the difficult issues, but putting that on the table and having those difficult conversations. And I think as part of that process, you often find that you're not as far apart as you think, that you have a lot of shared values. And that creates a stronger relationship. And then determining together how you want to move forward. But you have to have buy-in by everybody. The fact that the CEO says it, yes, everybody's going to do it. But any of you that are parents know that the children may do what you say, but you want them to live what you say. And in order to do that, it has to become a part of who they are. And so the CEO, just like a parent, sets the tone, set the example, you set the expectations. But as you do it more and more, then it becomes a part of who you are.
Great. And that leads to another question for you, Tamara. For those on the call or in the meeting that are looking to get that executive buy-in, what do you think the most persuasive reason was for you to recommend this program and to start it at Schnitzer Steel? If there's one.
I I think for us, I mean, this has always been part of my DNA for pretty obvious reasons. You know, I've in every industry or job I've taken, women, for example, have been you know, very few and far between, and so it's just in my DNA to be more inclusive, because I obviously live it and feel it. But I think that going back to what I open with is that when you do get a sense that there's enough there are enough influencers within your organization that feel the same way, when you realize that to recruit, to retain, to bring your organization to the level that your communities are expecting, and to keep it current, that formalizing it does enable you to provide resources, and which is people dedicated to it, or outside help if you need it or the like, but it also forces you to set goals, measure progress, and continue to move it forward. So I think probably when it was very clear to me that it was key to so many people in the organization, but for us to really make progress on it, we needed to start measuring it and setting goals. That's when I think I went to Steph and said, you don't have to say yes, Steph, but if you want to do this, I'd like you to do it. And that is what I said, right, Steph?
Perfect, thank you. And that does lead to you, Steph, talking about getting people engaged. Where do you start when you're setting up employee resource groups? And do you have ground rules that you set for forming those groups?
That's great. And we talked about employee resource groups, and this goes back to what I said, meet the culture where it is. So when I first raised that notion in the company, we hadn't done a lot of foundational training. So the first reaction was, wow, if we do that, that's not inclusive. And employee resource groups are the exact opposite. They're highly inclusive. You're bringing together people that have similar thoughts, similar ideas, similar backgrounds, and things like that. So we have been on our journey for about a year before we thought about really doing something with it. And one of the members of our steering committee happened to be a veteran. And he was like, hey, Steph, let's just start a veterans group. I'm like, great. So how do we do that? And so we were both trying to figure out how to do this. And then his recommendation, that's why it's so important to have business leaders as part of this, people who think about the business. So his recommendation was, hey, what I'll do is put a business case together. I thought, great, okay, go and do that. And so he put a business case together and blew me away. And I sent it to Tamara, it blew her away. We were like, wow, we're going to use this for every employee resource group. We're going to use this blueprint to have this kind of business case, because we need to make sure that these groups are going to come together and help further our mission in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we literally launched our Veterans Employee Resource Group on Veterans Day in 2019. And once that group got up and running, it's interesting. Once the first group gets started, there's so much momentum. Employees saw this group and what was going on and what they were doing. And then I had someone come to me and say, hey, I want to start a pride group. I thought, great, okay, here's the blueprint. So we pulled out the business case from the veterans group, gave it to the person that wanted to start pride, and it kind of went from there. And so now we're up to 6 employee resource groups. But just to be clear, they're employee driven. So it's not Tamara and myself saying, hey, we need you to add to your goals to start employee resource groups. These are employees coming to us because they're seeing the benefits of coming together with people from across the organization with like minds who want to do what's right for the company, but also have a place where they can relate to other people, learn other people, work with people they may not have worked with before were it not for the employee resource groups, and form friendships. So we've had people form friendships. They are getting leadership development. There's been folks who have gotten promotions because of their exposure in the employee resource groups. And Whitney, you're one of them. So it's really been fantastic, and it's exceeded our expectations. We're so proud of the employee resource groups. We're excited about the video that we were able to share. But my advice is just to start doing it. And again, going back to the first question that you asked me, Whitney, find the ambassadors, because many people in the company, like Tamara said earlier, are thinking the same thing. They're thinking the same thing. They're like-minded. They'd like to make sure the culture is a welcoming culture, and they want to do things to make the culture better.
That's great. There are a lot of questions coming in around how to get people who have that diversity of thought into your company so you can start seeing some of these changes. So Cheryl, I have a question I'll direct at you first, and then Steph, you may want to add on to it as well because of your HR hat. What activities can a company or a manager employ to try and get more diverse candidates for hiring?
Good question. So as I mentioned, we are really casting a wider net, looking in those areas that we may not have had a focus on previously. So really looking outside of the traditional ways that you may be looking to recruit new employees. And then encouraging your existing staff to reach out to their peers and folks that they may know. You know, I've seen that happen here at ISRI several times, and certainly saw it when I was in the government sector. It's really because they're going to be working with them, so they want to bring in somebody that's going to, you know, help better the organization. So really reaching out there, and including yourself in different types of recruitment activities that they're held on school campuses, and Stephanie can talk about this far more than I can. But really looking at those employment recruitment opportunities that may exist, and then, you know, it can sometimes happen in an everyday conversation. You can meet someone and you can say, you know what, this person might be a good fit. So just always being aware and keeping your ears open. And with that, I'll turn to Steph, who's far more experienced at this than I am.
Yeah, sure. You may have a career in human resources. I am always recruiting. Just want to put that out there. But definitely what Cheryl said is spot on. Cast a very wide net. Go to non-traditional places to hire. What tends to happen in our industry in recycling is we like to hire people that are in the industry, and that's great. People in recycling are phenomenal, but cast a very wide net. Look at different backgrounds and people that don't think the same as you. There's lots of assessment tools out there. We like Caliper. It's a great assessment tool where you can look at basically it's a survey that someone takes, and it gives you a very good indication of how well they may perform in the job or what their preferences are. But you could bounce that data against the hiring manager, the team, and really look at different skills and tools. For example, I don't particularly like a lot of detail, so I have people on my team that love detail work. So things like that. You want to make sure you have the right balance and the right skill balance. You definitely want to think about different ways to recruit, like fellowship programs, internship programs, bringing in different types of talent. Tamara mentioned the Rooney Rule earlier, and for those who don't know what that is, that's a rule that was put in place by one of the owners of the Pittsburgh Steelers many, many years ago, and they were trying to hire more African-American coaches. So what they ended up doing is every interview panel had to have at least one African-American on the panel. And so if you put some guidelines in place that can kind of force your pool to be more diverse, then by default, you're going to end up getting more diverse candidates. And for Schnitzer Steel, we put that in place 2.5 years ago. And we also, and so our internal team follows that process as well as any external recruiters. We tell them, hey, bring us a diverse slate, different backgrounds, different education backgrounds, things like that. Think about blind resume screening. And blind resume screening is you take everything off the resume that can give any indication of the person's ethnicity, background, social, economic status, etc., and just look at the actual skills, the skills and experiences of that candidate when you're recruiting. And then over time, then the team becomes more diverse and value diversity. So managers need to learn how to lead diverse teams. There is no one size fits all approach in terms of how you lead. But from a recruiting process, definitely look at non-traditional ways to recruit and always recruit. I'm always recruiting. I'm in the airport recruiting, everywhere recruit, because you meet people from different walks of life that have phenomenal skill sets that could be a great fit within your organization. Thank
you, Steph. There's another question that I'm going to direct your way. So there's there are a lot of questions around engagement. So your comment about engagement surveys, what does an engagement survey look like? But then there's also some questions around how do you motivate and engage your teams? Do you have any thoughts that you want to share just on the idea of engagement for staff around DE&I?
Oh, wow. That's we need a whole nother 90-minute webinar for that one, Whitney. I have 3 minutes to answer that one? Okay, I will try. Engagement comes in all forms and all sizes, right? But I think it's really important to have the right tone at the top. So we're lucky at Schnitzer Steel that we have Tamara, and she's all about employee engagement. And that's contagious. So our leadership team, our entire C-suite, everyone's engaged. We the type of culture we have is, yes, we have levels and org charts, but anyone can call Tamara, call me, call anybody, and we'll pick up the phone and we'll talk to you and find out kind of what are your concerns, what are your issues. But it really starts with leadership, making sure everyone has a voice and letting people speak up and have their voice and listen to the input and listen to input that's different than yours. Purposely seek people out that have different opinions. It's amazing how much you can learn from that. And then engage at all levels. So for me, even though I don't travel as much, but I used to be on a plane almost every week, every time I'm at our facilities, I make a point of putting on my boots and walking out in our yards and talking to as many employees as possible, understanding where they're coming from, hearing their concerns, keeping the pulse on the operation, so I can feed that up to our leaders and things like that. But letting them know we care, be approachable, be accessible, et cetera. Like, yes, there's courses on how to lead this, but engagement is it's more intrinsic. It's not really a course. There's things you can do to make sure employees are engaged, but it really is listening, what I call manage by walking around, be present. Make sure you speak to your teams. If your team is dispersed, like many of us have dispersed teams, Zoom calls. We have Zoom happy hours on my team, for example, on Fridays. That's one way to engage. Zoom calls when you're just checking in on your team, because we always have staff meetings and we have our agendas and we're going through metrics. We have huddles where we literally have huddle calls when we talk about how are you feeling? What's going on? What's the pulse of the operation? How's the culture? How are you feeling? One-on-ones with your staff members. We all have one-on-ones with everybody. I have one-on-ones with Tamara. We all have one-on-ones. And mostly it's to check in. I remember when Tamara did my performance review, I was like, oh, shoot, Tamara just wanted to check in with me. How are you doing? How's it going? How do you feel? How do you feel last year went? That's a great way to engage if the conversations happen properly. So many conversations with your team members, and listen and be open to what they say in terms of feedback.
Thank you, Tamara, Steph, and Cheryl, for answering all of those questions. I think we've gotten to the meat of them, and I'll go ahead and hand over to Mary Ann now for closing.
Thank you, Whitney. And thank you to all of our presenters. You've given us all a lot of information that I think will be very helpful in helping us all move forward in creating our plans to implement DE&I at our workplaces. The interesting thing about this, though, it's really not necessarily completing a plan, just ticking off boxes, right? It's thinking about the way we live around others, whether it's at work or in our personal lives. And that's the thing I think that we have to keep reminding ourselves. It's just not a task to get done. It's something that we need to be living. And I think that's a great message that you've all certainly confirmed and have stated through your words. I would like to let everyone know that we are going to be having 3 additional trainings in this series. Our next one is about recognizing and addressing unconscious bias. You heard Tamara and Steph talk a little bit about that earlier. So this next training, which will be on February 2, 1:30 to 3 p.m. Eastern, and I did post the link in the chat box for anyone who's interested. This that training will be specifically on unconscious bias. And then we have 2 additional trainings in the series. One is specifically for how do you implement DE&I for government workers, and then how do you engage with diverse communities is the other topic. So the dates of those last 2 trainings are being planned and finalized at this moment, and we'll let you know when they come out. But we will have the recording from this training posted, and we will email you to let you know when that is available. Again, I would like to thank all of our speakers for sharing your expertise and your just your words of wisdom about your, as was said before, the journey that you've all taken to work on DE&I. And I look forward to working with you all in the future. Thank you and have a great
Thank
afternoon,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.